The wind was strong that night. Cold air moved through the quiet fields, making the old wooden house groan. Daniel sat inside, near the fire, holding a cup of warm tea. His dog, Brutus, lay sleeping near his feet. The clock on the wall ticked. Slowly it was past midnight. Everything felt still. Then it came 3 soft knocks on the door. Brutus lifted his head. His ears stood up. Daniel placed the cup down and grabbed the old shotgun near the wall. No one ever came here. Not this late, not this deep into the countryside. He opened the door carefully. A woman stood outside, but she wasn't human. Her skin was soft blue with a faint silver glow. Long white hair stuck to her face from the cold. She was shaking, barefoot, wearing nothing but torn clothes made of strange fabric. In her arms was a small child, wrapped in a dirty blanket. The child's skin was pale and glowing like hers, but the little girl wasn't crying. She just stared up at Daniel with wide, tired eyes. Before Daniel could say anything, the woman spoke. "Please," she said, her voice weak but clear, "don't let them take us. We have nowhere else to go." Daniel didn't move. His heart was beating fast. Was this real? An alien, a mother and child? Right on his porch. She fell to her knees. The child let out a soft cough. Something inside. Daniel told him to shut the door and call the local authorities. This wasn't his problem. It was dangerous, but something stronger pushed him forward. He knelt and touched the woman's arm. Her skin was ice cold. "Get inside," he said, opening the door wide. "Hurry." She nodded and stood slowly, carrying the child into the house. Brutus growled softly but didn't move. Daniel shut the door and locked it, led them near the fire. The woman sat on the floor with the child in her lap. The warmth seemed to help. Her hands shook as she pulled the blanket tighter around her daughter. Daniel noticed strange marks on the child's wrist, metal, glowing blue, like a tracking device. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. She looked up, unsure. "My name is Cyrilla," she whispered. "And this is Ilya, my daughter." Daniel nodded. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, "but we've been running for days." "They are close who?" he asked. She looked toward the window. "Hunters, they want her." Daniel walked over to the window and pulled the curtain slightly. Outside was only snow and darkness. "Why would someone want your daughter?" he asked. Cyrilla took a deep breath. "Because she carries something rare. Her father was royal. They killed him. Now they want her to use her blood, her body, her name." Daniel felt a deep sickness in his stomach. "That's sick." "She is just a child," Cyrilla said, her voice cracking. "She has done nothing." Daniel looked at Ilya. Her little head rested on her mother's shoulder. Her eyes were still open but barely. Her breathing was soft and weak. "She's burning up," he said, touching her forehead. "She needs medicine." "We had none," Cyrilla replied. "I was hoping to reach a human city, but the snow came fast." Daniel stood. "I have some supplies in the bathroom. I'll check." He returned with a small box of old human medicine and a wet cloth. Cyrilla gently wiped her daughter's face and fed her a little pill, hoping it would help. Then came the sound of tires outside. Brutus barked loudly and ran to the door. Daniel moved quickly to the window. A black hover truck had stopped on the road near his field. 2 figures stepped out. They had helmets, weapons, and a scanner that beeped slowly as they moved closer to the house. Cyrilla held Ilya tighter. "They found us." Daniel closed the curtain. "Stay here," he said. "Don't make a sound." He grabbed the shotgun and opened the door just a little. The cold rushed in. One of the men shouted, "We're looking for someone." Tall woman, long white hair, with a child. "You've seen anything strange out here tonight?" Daniel stepped onto the porch. "Nothing strange out here except the cold," he said. "No visitors, no noise, just me and my dog." The man looked around. His scanner beeped louder. "Mind if we check the barn?" Daniel nodded. "Go ahead." They turned and walked toward the barn. As soon as they did, Daniel shut the door and locked it tight. He turned to Cyrilla. "We don't have long. They'll be back when they find nothing." Cyrilla looked at him with wet eyes. "You're helping us. Why?" Daniel knelt beside her and whispered, "Because no one deserves to be hunted with their child. Not on my land." Outside, the snow began to fall again. But inside, 3 hearts beat together, scared, but no longer alone. Snow covered the trees like a thick white blanket. Morning came slow, with a pale light in the sky. Daniel had barely slept. He sat near the window, holding his cold cup of tea, watching the road. Brutus lay at the door, still alert. Cyrilla sat close to the fire with her daughter Ilya in her lap. The child had stopped shivering. Her breathing was softer now. Daniel felt a strange weight in his chest. He had helped many animals before, but never a being like her, and never a child this silent, this tired. Cyrilla stood slowly and said, "There's something I need to show you." Daniel looked at her. "What is it?" "Our escape ship. It's not far. I hid it in the forest the night we crashed. If they find it, they'll know we were here." Daniel nodded and grabbed his coat. "Let's go, but we'll have to move quiet." He left Brutus with the girl. The dog rested beside her, calm but watchful. The trees whispered as they walked through the frozen woods. Cyrilla led the way, her bare feet hardly touching the snow. Daniel offered his boots, but she refused. She said her body could handle the cold better than a human's. After half an hour of walking, they reached a clearing. Something large was buried under the snow, covered with branches and mud. Cyrilla knelt and cleared the top. A small ship appeared, gray and broken, with one wing torn off. "This is it," she said. Daniel stepped closer. The ship was burned in places. A hole had been cut in one side. He could see inside, dark, cold, and still. "They shot us down," Cyrilla said. "We tried to run after my husband was killed. He gave his life so we could escape, but we didn't get far." Daniel climbed inside. The air inside was thin, but the lights flickered weakly. In the middle of the floor sat a round device, glowing with a blue light. Cyrilla joined him and touched it gently. A hologram appeared. A tall alien male stood inside the light. His face was strong, proud, and tired. He looked straight ahead and said, "If you find this and I'm gone, protect them. She is my mate, and the child carries my name. Promise me." The image ended. Daniel turned to Cyrilla. Her hand shook as she pressed the device close to her chest. He was the last of his bloodline. "They feared what our child could become." "Royalty?" Daniel asked. "Yes," she said. "But that means nothing to the ones hunting us. They want to use her for their own gain. If they get her, they will control my people through her." Daniel looked around the ship again. "Is there anything here they can track?" Cyrilla pulled out a black box from under the seat. "This is the beacon. It still sends a weak signal. I wanted to destroy it, but I didn't have the tools." Daniel took the box and smashed it against the metal wall. It cracked open, sparks flying. He threw it outside and stomped on it until the light inside died. "That'll do," he said. But then he heard a sound, a faint worry noise in the sky. Cyrilla looked up. "They're here." Daniel grabbed her hand. "Run." They ran back into the forest, slipping through trees and dodging roots. Behind them, a small scout drone flew low over the trees. Its red light swept over the broken ship, scanning everything. By the time Daniel and Cyrilla reached the farmhouse again, Brutus was already barking. Daniel rushed inside and locked the door. "Ilya is still asleep," Cyrilla said, checking her daughter. Daniel grabbed a blanket and covered the window. "They saw the wreck. We need to prepare." Cyrilla touched his arm. "You could leave us. Now if they catch you helping, they will punish you." Daniel stared at her. "You think I care about them?" he asked. "You came to my door. I let you in. That makes you my responsibility now." Cyrilla looked down, her voice soft. "You are not like the others." Daniel grabbed an old backpack and started packing supplies. "We'll move at night. I know a place in the hills, an old hunter's shelter. No one goes there anymore." Cyrilla nodded. "Then we will follow you." That night, after sunset, Daniel looked once more at his small home. It had always been quiet, always safe. Now it held secrets and danger, but also something new, something worth protecting. The stars above glowed brighter than usual. Somewhere, out there, powerful beings were hunting a mother and her child. But Daniel had made his choice. He would not give them up. Not now, not ever. The wind picked up as the sky darkened. Daniel moved fast, leading Cyrilla and Ilya through the trees. Ilya clung to her mother's chest, wrapped tightly in a thick blanket. Brutus ran beside them, ears sharp and nose to the ground. Every sound in the woods felt louder now. Every branch snapped like thunder. Daniel knew these woods better than anyone. The old hunter's shelter was deep in the hills, a place forgotten by time. That was their only hope. But even as they moved quickly, Daniel felt a cold fear growing in his chest. Back near the farmhouse, a black truck rolled down the dirt path. It stopped where the snow was disturbed. Two bounty hunters stepped out, both tall, covered in dark armor, faces hidden under masks. One of them held a scanner. The other carried a rifle. "They were here," the one with the scanner said. "The signal led us straight to this land." "The tracker on the girl must still be active," the second replied. "We will find them before morning." Their boots crushed the snow as they followed the tracks into the forest. Far ahead, Daniel reached a rocky hill. He stopped and pointed to a thick patch of brush. "In there," he said. "Behind that wall of vines is the shelter. We'll be safe for now." Cyrilla pushed through first. Behind the vines was a small metal door, half covered by snow. Daniel unlocked it and helped them inside. It was tight, but dry. Old metal walls, a few broken chairs, a heater that still worked when kicked twice. It wasn't much, but it was better than the cold outside. Cyrilla sat down with Ilya in her arms. The little girl had fallen asleep again, her small body warm against her mother's chest. "You were ready for something like this," Cyrilla whispered. "I used to hunt in these woods," Daniel said. "Built this place when I was young. Never thought I'd be using it like this." He checked the supplies, some canned food, old water bottles, and a first aid kit. Not much, but enough to last a few days. Then he heard it, a distant echo in the trees. Footsteps, slow, heavy. "They're tracking us," he said. Brutus growled. Low. Daniel turned off the heater and dimmed the lights. The footsteps stopped right outside the shelter. One of the hunters stood above the vines, scanning the ground. The red light of the scanner swept slowly back and forth. Inside, no one moved. Ilya stirred slightly, and Cyrilla held her closer. The hunter spoke into his comms. "Heat trace ends here. They're hiding close, maybe underground." Daniel's fingers gripped the shotgun, but then a burst of static came from the scanner. "We lost the signal." the second hunter said. Track has been destroyed. They're moving blind now. The first hunter stepped back. We come back at sunrise. Burn the whole forest if we have to. Daniel waited until the sound of boots faded into silence. Cyrilla looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. We cannot run forever. No, Daniel said, but we can fight. Cyrilla seemed surprised. You would risk your life for us. Daniel looked at the child, then at her. You came to me for help. That's all I needed. That night, Daniel stepped out of the shelter alone. The moonlight made the snow glow blue. He carried an old bag and walked toward the road. He reached a small outpost near the town. It was quiet. A single guard sat outside, half asleep. Daniel waited until the guard turned away, then slipped inside. He moved quickly through the storage room. Shelves of supplies lined the walls. He grabbed what he needed: food packets, water flasks, thermal blankets, and a set of EMP charges used to disable drones. He stuffed everything into his bag and left before the guard noticed. Back at the shelter, he handed the items to Cyrilla. These should help us move better, he said. And if they send more drones, I'll shut them down. Cyrilla looked at the EMP device. Where did you get these? I used to be a soldier, Daniel replied. Long ago, before I left the war and started living alone. Cyrilla placed a hand on his arm. Then you know what this is. It's not just running. It's a war. I know, he said. And I'm not letting them win. Outside, the wind howled again. Somewhere deep in the woods, the hunters prepared for morning. They had more weapons, more tools, more power. But they didn't have what Daniel had: a reason to protect, family to defend, and no fear of what came next. The air smelled like metal. Daniel woke suddenly. Brutus was already growling near the door. Something had changed outside. The forest was glowing red. It wasn't the sun. He stepped out of the shelter and looked. The ship was descending slowly above the trees. It was wide and dark with blinking red lights and long wings that spread like shadowy arms. It made no sound, but the cold wind shifted with its weight. Cyrilla stepped beside him, holding her daughter close. Her eyes went wide. That's not a scout ship, she said. That's a capture vessel. Daniel understood what that meant. They weren't searching anymore now. They were hunting. He moved fast. We have to leave the shelter now, he said. They're not going to wait until morning anymore. He grabbed the EMP charges from the bag and stuffed supplies into a pack. Cyrilla hesitated. If they brought that ship there ready for war, Daniel's voice was calm but firm. So we don't give them one. We stay low and move fast. They ran through the trees using shadows and snow to cover their path. A glow from the ship followed above them like a giant red eye. Then the voice came. It was deep and inhuman, broadcast through the forest from above. Return the fugitive child and be rewarded. Stay silent and live. Resist and face elimination. Ilya whimpered and buried her face in her mother's neck. Daniel looked up at the lights burning above the trees. You're not taking anyone, he said under his breath. He led them toward an old logging road, mostly forgotten, now covered in branches and ice. It led to an abandoned mine where he once hid during a storm years ago. That was their new goal. But halfway down the path, a red beam struck the ground behind them. Snow exploded upward. The sound of engines roared above them. Ship had sent drones. Daniel dropped to one knee and pulled the EMP device from his pack. He waited for the drone to get closer. It buzzed through the trees, scanning the ground. Red lights flickered across the snow. Daniel tossed the EMP underhand like a stone. A loud pop cracked through the air. The drone spun wildly, then crashed into the snow with a sharp spark. Daniel turned to Cyrilla. Run now while they're confused. They moved again, this time faster. Cyrilla's feet bled from the ice, but she kept going, holding Ilya with both arms. Brutus ran ahead, leading the way with his nose to the ground. The mouth of the mine came into view just as two more drones dropped from the sky. This time they were not scanning, they were firing. Daniel dove behind a fallen tree and pulled out his second EMP charge. He hit one drone directly midair. It exploded in a burst of silver lit. The second dodged and fired a small pulse toward Cyrilla. She screamed as the beam grazed her side. Daniel jumped over the log and shot at the drone with his old shotgun. The blast hit its wing, sending it spinning into a tree. It exploded with a crack and vanished into the snow. Daniel reached Cyrilla and helped her up. Your hit, he said. She nodded through gritted teeth. Just burned. I can still move. They entered the mine tunnel just as the ship above shifted away, searching another part of the forest inside the mine. It was cold but quiet. Daniel lit a small fire with some old dry wood and blankets. Cyrilla sat down, breathing heavy, her arm bleeding lightly. Daniel tore part of his shirt and wrapped the wound. Ilya curled up next to her mother and closed her eyes. She was exhausted and shaking, but Cyrilla looked at Daniel. Why do you fight so hard for us? Daniel sat across from her, staring into the small flame. I was a soldier once. I followed orders and saw innocent people get hurt. I told myself I'd never be part of that again. He looked at Ilya. Then I saw her on my doorstep. I saw fear in your eyes, and I knew what I had to do. Cyrilla reached across the fire and touched his hand. You've done more than help. You've given us a chance. Daniel gave a soft nod. Then let's make sure it's not wasted. Outside, the storm was growing stronger. The trees bent under the wind and the sky burned with red searchlights. But inside that old mine, 3 lives burned brighter. They had no army, no ship, no home, but they had each other, and they still had time to survive, to fight back, time to be more than hunted. The fire inside the mine crackled softly, but it could not chase away the cold. Daniel sat awake while Cyrilla and Elia slept curled under a thermal blanket. The mother's breathing was calm now, but her arm was still wrapped in makeshift bandages. Stared into the flames as memories came back to him. He remembered the war he left behind. He remembered orders that cost lives and missions that left villages in ashes, but nothing from those years made his hands shake the way this night did. He had protected people before, but never like this, never. Someone who trusted him with her child's life. When morning came, Cyrilla opened her eyes slowly. Her body ached and her mind was heavy, but she sat up and said in a quiet voice, "There's something I must tell you." Daniel turned toward her, ready to listen. Cyrilla took a breath and pulled up her sleeve. On her upper arm was a mark burned into her skin. It was shaped like a spiral with lines crossing through it. "This is the mark of exile," she said. Daniel looked at it for a long moment. "What does it mean?" "It means I was judged by my own people and cast out," she said. "Why?" he asked. Cyrilla looked away. "Because I chose to love someone forbidden." Daniel kept quiet, letting her continue. "My mate was not only of royal blood, he was from a rival house. His union with me was not allowed by our traditions. They called it a betrayal, they said. I weakened our lines and shamed our ancestors." Daniel felt anger rise in his chest. "So they punished you by hunting your daughter?" Cyrilla nodded. "They couldn't kill a royal heir. It would bring shame. So instead they sent others to take her and use her as a symbol of false loyalty. She would be raised by those who hated her and trained to obey." She looked at Ilya, who was still sleeping. "But I couldn't let them take her. I ran. I stole a pod and we escaped. That is how we ended up crashing on this planet." Daniel stood and paced the room. "And now they've brought a ship to burn a forest just to find one child." "She is not just a child," Cyrilla said. "She is the blood of two houses. Her DNA could unite or destroy entire councils." Daniel looked down at his hands. "I've seen war over oil, over water, over land. This is the first time I've seen it over a little girl's blood." He looked back at her. "Do you want revenge?" Cyrilla shook her head. "I want freedom for her. For me, that is all." Daniel moved toward the tunnel and peeked. Outside, the sky was clearer now, but the red ship still hovered far off in the distance. "We'll need to move again soon," he said. "There's an old communication tower a few miles south. We might be able to send a false signal and lead them away from here." Cyrilla stood slowly, her legs still weak. "We'll come with you." "No," Daniel said. "You stay here with Ilya. I'll go alone. It's safer that way." Cyrilla stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest. "You forget something, Daniel. You are not alone anymore." Daniel didn't argue. By noon, they were walking again. Daniel carried Ilya on his back, wrapped tightly in cloth, while Cyrilla followed closely. They reached the base of the tower by sunset. It was an old human structure, rusty and broken, but some power still pulsed inside. Daniel climbed up the side, using old metal bars at the top. He found the control panel and plugged in the false signal unit. He set it to broadcast on high frequency, sending a copy of Ilya's tracker signature far into the North Mountains. He climbed down quickly and rejoined Cyrilla. "If they follow that signal, we'll have at least 2 days of safety, maybe more," he said. But Cyrilla was not smiling. She stood frozen, staring at a tree nearby. Into the bark was a symbol, a fresh mark, the same spiral with crossing lines. "The hunters were here," she whispered. "They marked this place already." Daniel's face hardened. "Then we're out of time." They returned to the mine with new urgency. That night, Cyrilla held Ilya close. Daniel sat near the entrance with the shotgun in his lap. He looked at the stars, peeking through the broken stone ceiling. He had once come to this land to escape his past. Now, that past felt small compared to the danger outside, but he was no longer hiding. He had something worth fighting for, and nothing was going to take that away. Smoke rose from the edge of the forest. Daniel stood on the ridge, looking down at what was left of the village checkpoint. Burned trucks, black soil, heat still rising from the ground. The hunters had passed through here. Already they were getting closer to close. Back inside the mine, Cyrilla waited with Ilya wrapped in blankets. The little girl was coughing again, her fever rising. They had no more medicine, no more time to run. Daniel made a decision. He walked back down into the mine and dropped his pack beside the fire. "We can't keep hiding," he said. "They'll find this place within a day, maybe less." Cyrilla nodded slowly. "Then what do we do now?" Daniel looked into the fire for a long second. "We stop running, we fight." Cyrilla stared at him, unsure. "You can't take them on alone." "Daniel, I won't be alone," he said, "but I will go first. I know where they're resting for the night. Their main ship set down just 2 valleys east. There's a supply tent with fuel cells and targeting equipment." He picked up a set of EMP darts from his pack and loaded them into a small launcher. "If I destroy that tent, they'll go blind for a few hours. Enough time for you to move Ilya somewhere safer." Cyrilla touched his arm. "This is not your war. You could walk away." Daniel didn't even blink. "It became my war the moment you knocked on my door." That night, Daniel moved like a ghost through the woods. He wore dark clothes and painted his face with ash to match the shadows. He'd done things like this before, but never with so much on the line. Each step was heavy with purpose, each breath slow and silent. In the distance, he saw the glow of the enemy camp. Tall lights surrounded it, and drones circled high above. But just like he thought, the supply tent sat outside the main circle unguarded. Daniel crawled through tall grass toward the fuel tanks. He placed EMP darts on the control units, then slipped behind a metal crate. He checked his timer, 3 minutes. He used those minutes to plant Noise beacons in nearby trees, fake movement, signals, false footsteps, sound decoys. Then he slipped back into the woods just as the darts exploded. Blue light flashed across the trees. The lights in the camp blinked and died. The drones above spun in confusion and crashed to the ground like falling stars. Panic followed, shouts, orders, weapons firing into empty shadows. Daniel smiled and vanished into the dark. Back at the mine, Cyrilla had already moved Ilya into a cart Daniel had built from old supplies. Brutus stayed beside them, ready to guide the way. They pushed the cart through the tunnel toward a second exit Daniel had opened weeks ago. They reached the clearing just as Daniel returned, breathless but smiling. It worked, he said. We have a few hours before they get their eyes back. Cyrilla stepped forward, but Daniel stopped her. You take Ilya and follow Brutus north. He'll lead you to an old cave system with a sealed entrance. It's safe and dry. And you? She asked. I'll hold them off at the mine. Just long enough to cover your trail. Cyrilla shook her head. No, we go together. Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder. This is the only way to keep her safe. They're not after me, they're after her. You know that. Tears welled in Cyrilla's eyes, but she nodded. She turned the cart and followed Brutus into the forest. Daniel returned to the mine. He set up traps along the tunnel wires, broken glass, spike pits. He poured fuel into the narrow path and waited with a torch ready. Soon enough he heard them. Heavy boots, fast breath weapons, charged. The hunters entered the mine expecting fear. Instead they found fire. Daniel lit the torch and dropped it into the fuel. Flames raced through the tunnel. Smoke roared back at him. Screams echoed through the mine as equipment burned and shadows twisted. When the fire died, Daniel stepped out, his arm bleeding, his clothes torn, but his eyes strong. He had done what he came to do. He had bought them time. He had kept his promise. He looked up at the dark sky where stars still watched in silence. This time he was not running. This time he stood and focused, and he would keep standing until the end. A pale dawn spread over blackened trees. Daniel leaned on a scorched beam outside the ruined mine. His body hurt, but his purpose stayed bright. Smoke drifted upward, then vanished into cold air. He whistled once. Brutus trotted from the shadow's tail, low eyes keen together. They followed a hidden trail north. Icicles snapped under boots inside a limestone cave. Cyrilla waited with Ilya wrapped in blankets. A lantern cast gentle gold light. Relief filled Cyrilla when Daniel appeared. You are alive. He nodded and knelt beside the child. We bought some time, but hunters will regroup soon. We must leave the planet today. He unfolded a weathered map. An old freight rail runs to Ravenport space dock. Smugglers launch from there at dusk. If we reach the rail, we can ride a maintenance sled down the mountain. Cyrilla squeezed his hand. Then we move now. Her wound throbbed, yet her eyes burned with will. Daniel lifted Ilya onto his back. Brutus led them out into knee-deep snow. By noon they reached tracks that sliced through granite cliffs. A derelict mag sled rested on a siding half buried in ice. Daniel ripped open the control panel and crossed frayed wires. The engine hummed awake, showering sparks. They climbed aboard and the sled lurched forward. Wind lashed their faces as landscape blurred past. Ilya opened her glowing eyes and pointed upward. She whispered one soft word in her tongue. Stars. Cyrilla kissed the child. Soon little light mountains fell behind. Gray sea appeared ahead, crowned with cranes. Ravenport sprawled like a wounded metal beast along the shoreline. They hid the sled behind scrap heaps and slipped into the maze of alleys. Dockworkers shouted in many languages. Drones buzzed overhead. At berth 9 a freighter named Horizon Breaker loaded crates of grain. A broad mechanic with chrome augments guarded the ramp. Passage costs credits and silence, she said. Daniel offered a pouch of lithium shards and polished gems. The woman weighed the payment, then jerked her thumb. Livestock hold. Rear deck move quick. Inside smelled of straw, coolant and steel, yet it was safe. Cyrilla settled Ilya on a canvas pallet. Engines rumbled, preparing for launch. Daniel secured the hatch and exhaled. Sirens wailed outside through a slotted vent. He saw armored figures storm the quay. Crimson scanners swept every crate. The hunters had arrived early. Horizon Breaker tried to lift. Mag clamps still locked the keel. One hunter raised a rocket launcher, aiming at the freighter engines. Daniel's heart beat. Thunderdee climbed a ladder to a side port and cracked it open. Icy wind blasted in. He hurled his last EMP dart into the night. Blue pulse swallowed the rocket. Guidance failed. The missile veered into a loading crane and erupted. Fireballs blossomed, showering sparks across the dock. The shockwave knocked hunters flat. Dock control panicked and released clamps. Horizon Breaker roared skyward. Daniel sealed the hatch and slid down the ladder. Cyrilla met him halfway, eyes wide with mixed fear and awe. You saved us again. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. Could not let the story end at the dark. Acceleration pressed them to the deck as clouds whipped past portholes. Earth curved below, wrapped in storms and blue oceans. Brutus lay at Ilya's side, calm now that danger shrank behind. Cyrilla spoke softly. Beyond regulated space lies a frontier world called Haven Reach. No royal banners, no bounty laws. We can grow crops under twin moons and teach Ilya the songs of both her houses. Daniel watched. Stars sparkle above the horizon. Sounds peaceful. Think a stubborn farmer from Earth could belong there. Cyrilla placed her palm against his cheek. You already belong with this. Engines shifted to faster than light mode. Port windows shimmered with streaks of color like rivers folded through glass. For the first time in years, Daniel felt weight lift from his spirit. No more hidden tunnels. No more burning villages, no more hunters in the snow-only open sky shared with a mother, a child, and a loyal dog. He knelt beside Ilya, her small hand closed around his finger in that quiet grip. He felt an oath stronger than any treaty. He turned to Cyrilla. I will build walls when storms rise and plant orchards when seasons turn. I will teach her courage and kindness. I will guard your mornings and your dreams. Cyrilla leaned forward, resting her forehead against his tears, shimmered carried by hope. Family is not blood alone, she whispered. It is choice, courage, and love. Horizon breaker cut through the night, leaving Earth as a fading light behind inside its steel hull. 3 fugitives became one family. Among endless stars they would write a new chapter, one where hunters never win and kindness carries royal weight.